Rev up your engines!
Subaru is at it again. Subaru just recalled 500,000 of their cars. Airbags that can explode, throw shrapnel, even kill people. Now, they say at least it's not the driver's front airbag, so it might wipe out your passengers, but it also includes the side airbag for the driver, so the side airbag could throw metal through your head too. And here's the most bizarre thing of it all. This is the same vehicles that have been recalled in 2015 for the Takata airbags. But figure this one out. You think someone would learn. That recall replaced the original defective Takata airbags with what they have now found out are the new defective Takata airbags. So those don't work either. So they replaced junk with junk, which is the reason I tell people, hey, you ever get burned buying a certain model car, certain brand of car? Take my advice. Don't buy another one. They allowed Takata to replace defective Takata airbags with what has now turned out to be newer defective Takata airbags beyond the realms of my imagination. That's society these days. Now there's 500,000 of them that they got to do over. Now, you know what I say? Let's hope they don't use Takata airbags again. Because if they do, and they have yet a third generation of ones that aren't any good, well, what do they say? Fool me once, shame on you. What happens if they fool you 3 times? I don't know that one. Jay Bates says, Scotty, what are your thoughts on F-150 diesel trucks? Are they better than the regular gas engines? All right, if you're talking about gasoline versus diesel engines, you have to understand, what do you want? Because if you're just tooling around town, stop and go and running around, you're better with a gasoline engine. They cost less, they're quicker. But if you're the type of guy that's going to do a lot of long distance traveling, either hauling a bunch of stuff in the bed or pulling a large trailer, you're much better off with the diesel engines. I had a customer that his son raced motorcycles. He bought a big Ford diesel. He loved it because he was towing like this gigantic trailer that had like 6 motorcycles and all the tires and engines and parts in it. And if he would have had a gasoline engine, he probably would have gotten 4 or 5 miles a gallon. Well, he was getting like 13, 14 miles a gallon, which you might think is horrible gas mileage, but for a truck pulling all that weight, that was actually decent gas mileage. So decide what you want. Just don't think gas versus diesel. Think, what am I using this truck for? Then you can decide, am I doing a lot of hauling? Get a diesel. If you're not, get a gasoline. They're better for just regular driving. Mango's Vision says, Scotty, what's the worst BMW you had to work on as a mechanic, regular or M version? For actually working on the car, yes, it's an M series. But here's the strange thing. In the past, the M series were actually much better built than the regular BMWs. They were really strongly built. That was their racing type setup. Now, lately, they had a problem where they're going to recall them, and they had to put a stop sale on all the M's because they had a problem with the electric wiring and a transmission. But in the past, the M series were the best built ones, but the hardest to work on. I had one that I actually gave up on. Customer had bought front struts. I said, okay, I'll put them on. So I started taking a vehicle apart. Then I found out that because of the insane cantilever suspension system that the struts were inside, I was unable to get the struts off. I would have had to have these special BMW tools that I didn't have, that I wasn't going to go out and spend thousands of dollars on to do the job. Basically, the whole front end of the car had to be taken off. And since I don't have a lift, that would be an insane job. For somebody with a lift, it's a better job because they could lift it way up in the air and put braces on different parts and then drop the suspension down. But the fact that you had to drop the entire suspension of the car to change struts on a car, to me, that's stupid. Now, they do ride well. That one really cornered well. But when the struts wore out, of course, it didn't corner as well, and it was going to be a fortune. He had to go to a BMW specialist and spend well over $1,000 in labor alone just to change the 2 front struts. So that'll tell you, they are hard to work on. Jose LZ says, Scotty, the oil light comes on for a second when I start my car. Does it mean I'm low on oil? Well, of course, you want to check your oil, see if it's low or if it's really dirty, because that can make it happen. Price just that. Now, let's say you change your oil and filter, still doesn't. Then, what you want to do is replace the oil pressure sending unit. That's what tells the gauge how much oil pressure you have. As cars age, there's a spring inside. A lot of times they wear out, and then they make the light come on when you first start the car. Now, as long as your car isn't making clanging noises, you actually have oil pressure, because if you don't have oil pressure, clanging like mad, especially when idle, clank, 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 metal on metal wear, you might as well as change the oil pressure sending unit if changing the oil filter doesn't fix it. It's a decent warning system, and if that's starting to break down, most sending units cost maybe $20 or something. You can bolt them on and off yourself. In most cases, it's not a hard job to do. Love my Element, says Scotty. I have an '08 Honda Element, 160,000 miles. I started to experience a shudder when I speed hits around 32, then it goes away. Yeah, that's the typical shudder that those Honda transmissions often get. The Elements are excellent vehicles, but their weak point, as with most Hondas, are automatic transmissions. Now, I got a customer with an Element that's got a 5-speed standard transmission. I mean, they're solid built. The transmissions on yours are the weakest point, and they do that shuddering as they age. Now, you could try changing the fluid, put new fluid in, only use Honda fluid. Hondas are very particular about their fluids. Only use Honda fluid and see what happens. But if that doesn't fix it, personally, I'd live with it. A lot of times they can shudder for years and still go. And when you price what it costs to either rebuild or replace the automatic transmission in your Element, you are going to not be a happy person. I've seen people spend anywhere from $3,500 to $5,500 having those transmissions done over. And that's a lot of money for an old vehicle with a lot of mileage. Steven 1203 says, hey, I replaced all 4 struts on my car. The ride's better, but it's still clunky. Is there another part that could affect that? Oh, sure, there's all kinds of parts. Here's what you have to realize. You said you replaced all 4 struts. Now, a McPherson strut is an assembly. Inside, there's a strut cartridge, and I'm assuming that's the part that you changed. You probably used over the spring. Now, if the strut mount itself was worn on any of those struts, it'll still clunk because that's the top, and if it's worn, it'll clunk when you hear bumps. But your lower control arms, they go up and down. They have bushings. The bushings could be wearing and clunking. It could be the ball joints on the bottom. It could be the tie rods. It could even be your steering rack. There's a lot of things that can make clunky rides. If you actually hear a noise, though, at least jack it up and try pulling on stuff to replicate the noise. Now, if you can't replicate the noise yourself, take it to a mechanic like me, and I have these listening devices, and they come with 4 sending units, and you stick them all over the car, wear headphones, and then you switch between 1, 2, 3, 4, and then you see where the clunk is the loudest, and you can diagnose it better. But a lot of times you can feel it and see where the clunk is coming from when you jack it up and there's play. Tylena says, I'm having trouble with my 2008 PT Cruiser, the computer. How do I fix it? You gotta find out, is it actually the computer that's gone bad? Those things are notorious for having electrical problems, and if you have an electrical problem in a sensor or in a wire that goes from the sensor to the computer, it can act like the computer itself is bad. Let's say it actually does have a bad computer. Well, it's a 2008. It's a modern car. You can't just buy one and plug it in because it won't work. It's got to reprogram to fit your car and reprogram for your anti-theft system. So you're going to have to pay a mechanic to do it anyway. Find a good mechanic who understands those things. Have them look into what it's going to cost to get a brand new computer, if it needs one, and reprogram it, and then decide, do you want to put that much money into a PT Cruiser? Realize those were horrendous vehicles, but those were one of the worst vehicles ever made, and now that it's 12 years old, it's probably going to fall apart in front of your very eyes. So my advice would be, if you find a good mechanic, maybe it's a bad wire or a sensor, and if they can get it so it runs, sell it and get yourself a Toyota or a Honda instead. Get a used one, because those things are just endless money pits. All my customers with them, they all ended up hating them, the ones who bought them, especially the ones that bought them used. They got them cheap and they thought, oh great, I got a great deal on this cool looking car, and then they found out it was a nightmare in disguise. Curtis Jeremiah says, what does it mean if I just had a wheel alignment but my car still steers to the left a lot? Well, one, it means that you had a crappy guy do the alignment. The job of being a mechanic is to fix a car, then road test it and see what happens. The alignment guys that I've been using for years in Houston, that's exactly what they do. First thing, they're very professional. You bring the car in. They make sure all the tires have the same air pressure, because that can mess things up. Then they check the alignment with their machines. But while they're checking the alignment, they pull on all the suspension parts, they look, and if you've got, say, a worn tie rod, they'll tell the customer, hey, you got a worn tie rod, we have to replace that before we align the car, or it's going to pull and it's still not going to work right. So, numero uno, don't go back to the guys that did your alignment, because they're not very good mechanics. They should have road tested it. They should have fixed what was wrong. Now, there's a lot of reasons they can pull. A problem in your drive axle. You could have a bad transmission mount. You could have a bad ball joint, tie rod, power steering rack, bad struts. There's a whole bunch of things that can do it. But that's the job of the guy who does a front-end alignment. So find a better alignment shop first. Don't go to those guys again. They just didn't care about the work they did. They didn't even road test the car to show you that it wasn't pulling anymore. Because if we're still pulling, they should have gone back to square one and figured it out. It's their job, not yours. So find a better shop. So if you never want to miss another one of my new car repair videos, remember to ring that bell.